Hello and welcome back, and after the arduous events of the last couple of reviews, I decided to do something quicker and easier this time around. I'm finally getting round to reviewing one of the Crash Bandicoot games. Well, I tried that with the Wrath of Cortex, but the game had other ideas. So instead I'm reviewing Crash Twinsanity instead. But first, a little bit of background into the game itself before I decide to do the whole story, gameplay, such and such. Basically, it started off when, after the release of the Wrath of Cortex and it didn't sell so well, the creators of the game at the time, Traveller's Tales, decided to have one last crack at the franchise before they were inevitably shoved off to the dungeon to make Lego games. Originally, they intended it to be this multi-world spanning epic with a more serious tone and a bunch of other things, and basically it was going to be the biggest, grandest, most ambitious game in the series. And then Ratchet and Clank came out with a very eerily similar aesthetic, tone and even story. And Traveller's Tales, panicking that they might be accused of plagiarism, decided to scrap almost everything. The game takes place about 3 years after the previous game's events, where the once frozen evil Dr. Neo Cortex decides to take revenge on his arch nemesis Crash Bandicoot by kidnapping Crash's sister Coco and dressing up as her to lure Crash into an ambush. The luring part somehow works. However, the ambush itself goes a bit pear-shaped, even with Cortex's minion engine piloting this giant robot version of Crash. And after a bit of a kerfuffle down a mine shaft between Crash and Cortex, they finally managed to escape the mine, only to be confronted by the game's two actual antagonists, the evil twins, who are a pair of mutated parrots with supernatural, if kind of ill-defined powers. And they announced that they plan to do something with a device or something to destroy the world, I guess. It's not really that well explained, and to be honest, it isn't really brought up in the story of the game after this point anyway. They also have a grudge against Dr. Cortex for some reason. With a greater world-ending threat established, Dr. Neo Cortex has to begrudgingly ally himself with the mental marsupial. Fortunately, Cortex has this weird machine that allows you to travel to different dimensions, such as the 10th dimension where the evil twins are hanging out. But the machine needs power crystals to actually power the thing. So the two managed to gather enough power crystals, only for then Coco to show up. Not quite sure where she was, but she is thoroughly pissed off and kicks Cortex into the machine, causing it to malfunction, break, and freeze her for some reason. So now there has to be another detour where Crash and Cortex have to go to Cortex's old school to retrieve his niece Nina. And on the way back from there, Cortex remembers what actually happens between him and the evil twins. You see, back in his school days, Cortex had a pair of pet parrots called Victor and Maurice, who he decided to use as test subjects for one of his evil devices. However, that device unintentionally teleported them to the 10th dimension, causing them to mutate and become hyper-intelligent, and now they're back and thoroughly pissed off with Cortex. After that, they head back to Cortex's lab, repair the machine, never really address where the fuck Coco went, and transport themselves to the 10th dimension. And after a brief diversion involving an evil 10th dimension counterpart of Crash, no, his existence is not explained, and if there was an explanation, it probably got cut out of the game so it can meet the deadline. After that brief excursion, they then head into the evil twins facility, and after a brief confrontation with Cortex's associates that are somehow there, and a cameo from Spyro the Dragon who's also there somehow. They then finally confront the evil twins, and Cortex manages to get them to trap themselves in a birdcage that's there for some reason, only for the birdcage to then transform into a giant robot that's also there for some reason. You know what? Fuck it. Whatever context there was for that bin was probably cut to meet the deadline as well. The Evil Twins robot is defeated by Crash piloting the Mecha Bandicoot from the beginning of the game. And no, there is no explanation how the fuck they got that thing there. Once again, cut to meet the deadline. The Evil Twins manage to escape, only to get cornered by the evil 10th dimension version of Crash, who's heavily implied to then eat them. Crash and Cortex manage to get back to their dimension, but with no lost between the two, Cortex decides to use the machine to dispose of Crash, only for it to malfunction and then teleport him into Crash's head, and that's the end. Okay then. The game is a semi-open world platformer with 4 hub worlds that contain linear levels that transition seamlessly between them and the hub world. Once you've completed one of the levels, you get access to a new bit of the hub world. We've also now opened up routes to get back to the previous sections if you want to. There are quite a few gameplay styles, most of them platforming, but still. The primary one is Crash himself, which plays your standard Crash Bandicoot affair with his iconic spin attack, jump, a double jump, a crouch move that then becomes a slide while you're moving or a belly flop while in the air. You navigate through the levels, going past or through obstacles, completing a few puzzles along the way, smashing boxes, grabbing Wumpa fruit that give you an extra life when you grab 100 of them, as well as masks that will give you an extra hit to make sure you don't die instantly, and if you gather 3 masks they temporarily give you invincibility. In some levels, Crash can grab a hold of Cortex that while reduces his jumping ability while holding him, he can use Cortex as either a weapon or throw him to areas that Crash can't access to perform tasks like taking care of enemies or activating levers or buttons or stuff like that. Later on you get to directly play as Cortex himself, who, while not having Crash's jumping capacity, does have a blaster laser gun that, while having limited ammo, you can also pick up extra ammo in the level in the form of boxes. The gun itself both has a standard shot or a charge shot, and there's also a blast jump that you can do, although personally I never really used it. And the final character you get to play as is Nina, who, while also not having Crash's jumping capacity, does have a pair of robotic hands that allow to emulate Crash's spin attack, as well as giving her an extendo punch and the ability to grapple onto things. There are also a couple of less prominent gameplay styles, such as rolling around like a ball or sledding down a mountain or using Cortex as a board, but they only really show up for a level or 2. My personal favourite level was Rooftop Rampage, where you get to play as Nina for the first time, and my least favourite was High Sea Hijinks, where you have to navigate Engine's battleship. The graphics are okay for a PS2 game that released in 2004. Definitely a step up over Wrath of Cortex. Plus the game tries to work with its limitations by giving the characters a more sort of cartoony and animated design rather than trying to look more realistic, which I feel both benefits the tone of the game as well as sort of alleviates the issues that might have come off with both the hardware and the time constraints of the game. While I feel that the art style was done decently well with the levels and environments, I feel that most of the focus was put on the characters as the main thing that stands out. And since Music Master is currently in the hospital after his mauling by a certain bird, I guess yet again I have to cover the music. The game's music is very much a unique case in comparison to many other games, as it goes for a sort of mixture of a cappella and beatboxing with some sort of electronics and synthesizing to add a bit of extra variety. They use this technique on multiple different music genres to fit the mood of the game or level at the time, although there are some interpretations and adaptations of more classical pieces, such as Strauss's Blue Danube Waltz or Fingal's Cave by Mendelssohn. So keep an ear open for those sort of things. What I can say is the music just generally makes me smile and is a refreshing take on the sort of music that can appear in video games. So a big thanks to the a cappella group Spiral Mouth for their contribution to this game. Although on a weirdly semi-related note, not only are there tracks that were created for levels that got cut, as well as alternate tracks for levels that weren't used, but there are even some cutscenes that for some reason don't have any real audio at all, that probably were supposed to have either music, voice acting, or even both. Yet again, probably cut to meet the deadline. I swear to fucking Christ, you can make a drinking game out of the things that got cut from this game. This game was reasonably enjoyable, if a bit annoying at points and relatively short. And while the story is passable, if having a bit few gaps and inconsistencies because etc etc. And the gameplay is reasonably fun, if can be a bit annoying, having a bit of issues with lag and glitches, although probably not to the same degree as Wrath of Cortex. I feel that it's both the visuals, soundtrack that sort of make this game stand out, with both its memorable a cappella soundtrack as well as its character designs that, in my eyes at least, almost certainly are the default version of the characters that I immediately think of. However, the third thing that elevates this game is its sense of humour, that effectively blends cartoony, immature, risque and even self-aware comedy almost seamlessly. A majority of it involving Dr. Neo Cortex, who for the first time was being voiced by Lex Lang after his previous voice actor Clancy Brown decided to decline reprisal of the role in this game. And fun fact, Lex Lang is still voicing Dr. Neo Cortex to this very day. Overall, while it's probably not the best Crash Bandicoot game, in my eyes at least it's probably the funniest. And I'd say it's definitely worth at least giving a try if you can get your hands on a copy and the appropriate hardware to play it on. Well, that's all from me. See you guys next time.